And we talked today a lot about Design Capital Helsinki and about different design projects. Let me bring the word to one of the projects that I'm most interested in here, or actually the reason why I'm here. And that's the big design experiment of Aalto University. You guys are trying something really crazy, you know. You're putting up 3 existing university bodies and putting them into one organization and hope when you have a faculty meeting that actually everybody gets out of that meeting alive, which is remarkable. When should we use design? Here are a couple of people in here who are non-designers, who are maybe from engineering, who are maybe from the more analytical side of science. Usually analytics work very well if we know what we're doing, if we exactly know the question, if we can simulate the system. However, very often we are faced with wicked problems. Every time a human being is in it, it turns out to be a wicked problem. We are faced with problems where we don't know all the variables, where we don't know how we can recreate and simulate the system, so we can't actually optimize. We cannot analyze and optimize. And if we are faced with this kind of question, with this kind of research challenge or design challenge, then it is design which allows us to iterate, which allows us to prototype, which allows us to use a test, which allows us to relatively fast learn and to bring up something that is useful and that will get us to the next level. And design is not about the product or the service that we create, it's about the behavior. And that's where all the things come together, using design behavior for the different wicked research questions, for the wicked questions that we are facing as societies, as companies, as communities, as urban communities. So design in a broader sense, changing behavior through design.
Great, thank you, Martin. And I think many of us would concur with that. It's interesting to think that Horst Rittel, who developed the phrase wicked problems, was from the 1960s too, along with Victor Papanak and our original start to the seminar. And I guess in the 1960s we started to introduce layers of complexity. And on that issue of complexity, and they're different today, we recognize that, but it's the way the complexity moves maybe that's the challenge. I'd just like to kick off with the first question really, which is about Aalto, Chongji, Stanford. You know, we've all got various things that we're doing, it seems, all over the world, and we're talking to each other. How do we go up a gear? Because clearly we're sharing a room together because we believe there's value in exchanging ideas and information and everything else. But how do we go up a gear? Because it seems to me, listening to the whole of today, that we still have huge wicked problems. Except there's a glimmer of hope that if we take this phrase mutual assistance, which I found wonderful in the last talk, that we just open up. Do we just have to relax? What's going on here? Lou, do you mind kicking off?
It's very nice that we can talk about this triangle relationship. And you know that in any culture, I think the triangle relationship is always very complicated.
They say three's a crowd, don't they? Yes.
And I think that in China, why we need to think design differently, I think because of the problems. And actually, I would say that the problem is always there, but now I think that we realize the problem more clearly and urgently. And actually, one thing I didn't talk too much during my speech is a traditional Chinese meaning of design. Mm-hmm. And the traditional Chinese pronunciation or term of design is 设计. 设 means setup, 计 means a strategy, which means set up a strategy. This is the original meaning of Chinese design. So I think it will give us lots of possibilities to talk about what kind of a strategy we need to set for our current problem and the situation.
Okay, thanks, Lou. Turka, do you care to pick up sort of a view from Aalto University and this idea about how we get a gear change through sharing across the world?
Well, I don't think I can bring too much new wisdom to this discussion now. We are already doing plenty of things, exchanging people and so forth. But then kind of linking that back to the discussion about the wicked problems brings a little bit maybe new insight, because Ritter and Weber in the article that they said about wicked problems that all the solutions are kind of fundamentally unique. So in a way the problem is that kind of how much can we learn from each other, because if we really believe in the wickedness problems, we need to kind of more or less start from the scratch every time we start doing something.
And it's about defining that problem space, isn't it? And sharing understandings on that perhaps, because we are joined up in the way we produce things. Can we have a point of view from Stanford? I mean, there's two of you here that have experienced Stanford. Martin, do you want to pick off first?
I'm going to argue with you. Actually, we do take it pretty relaxed. I think if you come to Stanford, you will see that you can hear all kinds of different languages, you will see all kinds of different faces. Mm-hmm. And if I'm interested in understanding how design works in rural China, I will find an expert onto design in rural China in Stanford. We just get all those guys over, and we sort of keep them with sunshine.
But you get out into the countryside, that's my next question, because that's where it seems too we're kind of missing these tricks about innovation. I mean, you've been out in the countryside, haven't you?
Let me just add one more thing in terms of collaboration. Yes, we can make nice seminars and nice cocktail parties, and we can meet at conferences and all those kind of things. At the end of the day, design is about behavior, about skill sets, about when to use which prototypes, about how to prototype and learn faster. And what we are doing in Stanford is we try to maximize, we just get those guys. And if we can't get those guys to come to us, we just go to those guys. And just sort of shorten the distance.
Okay. Linus, I mean, something's interesting that we kind of didn't quite process in your talk, that actually the team for Embrace didn't have a designer in it. Do you want to just talk about where the design fitted in there?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting. So we all came from different backgrounds, from from various disciplines. But yeah, none of us were formally trained as designers. But what we had was really good coaches and sort of advisors that really helped us and pushed us and steered us along the way. But I think it worked out well, and we were pretty successful in going about it. But we did actually, when we started growing the company, hire in product designers and things like that, because it did speed up the process along.
Great. Okay, thanks. Moving on to another question here, really, and these have come out of the day, so we can completely ignore the questions I sent you earlier before you came here. Well, they're kind of related, but the second question really is, and maybe Mugendi and Eric and Tuuli can take this one. The second question is really, who are our best allies? And maybe Tuuli, do you want to start first?
I think there are lots of good people and good organizations that we could work with. And of course, before we used to say, okay, engineers are designers' best friends, and that's how to start with. But probably today we need to move forward. And for example, with the public organizations, it's not just engineers that we need to work with. And so it seems that we really need to find, I don't have an answer, as you know, I'm just struggling finding my thought here, but it seems that we definitely need to find ways to talk the language and let them, learn our talking.
But there was that sense this morning, because Turka said, I think, with the 365 Wellbeing Project, moving out just to spend time with public sector people as designers was, finding new conversations, new relationships, new ways of looking at things. So maybe there's the clue. We just simply get out of the buildings and go and find some new people to play with. But on the allies thing, Eric, what's your kind of take on that? You needed many allies, obviously, for the Copenhagen wheel, but
made a few enemies too, I think. Along the way.
Okay, let's talk about the allies.
No, I would say that exactly that. Like, the public is your best friend. Like, getting out there, getting people's opinions on how the thing is used, or how it's experienced, or how it could possibly be improved. Like, if you look at the collective wisdom in a large group of people, they know more about any one problem that you could ever try and investigate on your own, So you can kind of crowdsource that learning or that education or experiences that they all have, and somehow try and take that value and fold it back into your problem or your product. I think that has great qualities.
And Mugendi, what's your thought on the best allies?
I think I'd agree with the previous speakers. And most of the best allies are already in the communities themselves. And the communities typically know who if I can use the quote, who comes in peace. Because there's been lots of interventions. Some have been more disruptive than intended. And communities tend to have developed institutional memories. So they know who they trust, and they know who has their best interests at heart. And I think as gatekeepers of their own interest, you cannot go wrong but be in alliance with them.
Yeah, thanks. Cindy, do you want to come in with the next question?
Certainly. I'm going to be actually very rude and ask you something that we didn't send you beforehand. So maybe I need to explain it a little bit more beforehand also, is that in the interests of continuity, thinking about the past and the future and where we're going, I was actually born in one of those revolutionary years. I was born in the year of the Suomenlinna seminar, and the year when the Apollo sent that famous photo of the Earthrise, which changed a lot of mindsets. And the Parisian students were riding in the streets and so on and so on. So I'm supposed to be the generation that receives this legacy from Papanek and Bucky Fuller and Professor Sotama and so on and so on. And so did I drop the ball, or what happened? And I sort of, my view on it is that maybe that generation gave to us, Generation X, the really, really heavy anvil. But with all due respect, you forgot the hammer. So of course, I'm a cynical Generation X, but I have a lot of optimism now. So I think that Professor Sotama is right, that those seeds that were planted in the 60s and the 70s, actually this is the right time that we're actually starting to see the blooms and the blossoms and the green growth right now. So it is quite a good time. But what I would like to ask every panelist now is that what is the tool that is missing from your toolbox now? And you can be as metaphorical as you like.
I think we pretty much figured out how to come up with great concepts, great products, great prototypes, and we pretty much figured out how to stimulate and excite people and create buy-in in a small group level. We do get painful bruises when we try to implement this kind of thing in large organizations. For example, let's make fun of Germans, a big German engineering company or something like this. When you try to bring in creativity, dynamic iterations into those kind of things, you might have the same problem when you bring it into a university and ask for new things which are not pre-planned 3 years in ahead. So this transition from what we can do on a designer level and on a team level towards what we can do when we have to bring it into big companies is a huge problem, and we are trying out stuff with this, usually by trying to bring the people in, but there are only so many people you can bring in. My biggest workshop I had was 300 people in parallel, but at some point it's not scalable anymore, or I have to go digital. So
perhaps we have to take from what Mugendi said earlier about the people are there within the communities, and we can think of any company as a community too. And there's some big ones. I was talking with Carrefour the other day and said, how many employees have you got? 500,000. Okay, that's, well, a large part of Helsinki, let's put it that way. That's a big community, Tools, yes. Eric?
It's not so much a tool that I'm thinking of, but it's a way to, I guess it is a tool in the sense of how it can be analyzed. I think data is the biggest thing, and everyone's talking about big data right now and how much data is being thrown off. And I really think it has an important role for evidence-based design, because everyone has hunches and everyone has theories of what the solution could be, but it's really nice to have the statistical backing behind that. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the complex problems that designers face aren't so cut and dried. It's not necessarily just a black and white data answer, but if we can blend these different data streams together and combine them in meaningful ways, we can then glean insights that we really haven't been able to understand or quantify before. And so I think that's a tool that we're working on. We're definitely getting there, but I'm not sure we're quite there yet. So hopefully in the coming years.
A tool to combine data streams, yeah.
One tool that I could really benefit from where I come from is design champions that have political influence. I think if design can be embedded in the developmental agenda, there's a potential for design to facilitate a leapfrogging of entire communities on our continent into a much more sustainable future.
That's a walking, talking tool then. Yeah. Okay.
I have plenty of tools that I've been using and to engage people in design, but I think what I'm really missing is how have the decision makers and the political, people involved, and I think that's something that we should be working on. Another thing that I've been thinking for a long time is that when you're an industrial designer, you go browse these wonderful books, come from Alessi and all over, and you don't use the ideas as such, but those are like examples that you can apply. But when you're working in this kind of a context, you don't have those kind of books that you could go to, and I don't know, maybe we should put something together for getting these kind of, I don't know, Pantone color things for designers who are involved in these kind of projects.
A book of social colors, maybe. Yeah. Okay. And Linus.
Yeah. So on that note, on the tools, I think for us, in order to really make social impact, we really need to get government support, right? So political and government support, incorporating that into sort of our product. I remember I was in a district hospital and talking to the provincial doctor. And he wasn't interested. We're going to actually give him units for free for his whole district, and he wasn't interested because he was more interested in signing papers and getting his paycheck. And he looked like he was close to retiring. But how do we get that dialogue with the government, right, involved and see how these innovative designs can actually spread out faster because they have all the channels and they're the gatekeeper. So.
Dialogue tool for government. Okay, we'll work on that one, I think. Turkan, then Lou, and then we'll move on to the next question, and then that'll be our last question.
Plenty of tools that we need. One that I started to think about is perhaps just a kind of small piece in the designer's pocket, but probably becoming more and more necessary is that when we do these kind of things following the user-centered design approach, we kind of, we need to be careful with the users. As one colleague of mine from a big international company said, he was proud saying that we have great processes to use the users. And that wasn't so much a problem like 20 years ago or 30 years ago when user-centered design was kind of designing power tools, and then the kind of interface with the user was that we wanted to check that the handles are kind of good for the person's grip band, and that wasn't really kind of personal, it wasn't so sensitive, it was quite okay to do that and publish the results. And then when I designed myself like 90s, basically, that was the time when I was a practitioner working for Nokia. We were interested in mobile communication and how people can kind of exchange messages. That started to be already a little bit kind of more personal, and we had to be a little bit kind of careful with it, kind of how we publish this information and how we kind of present our results within the company and outside of the company. But now in these projects, 365 Wellbeing, we are dealing with kind of completely different kind of issues. We are designing with the city of Espoo and child welfare people there. We are kind of discussing problems related to taking children under custody, and in some other projects of ours, we are kind of discussing the problems related to psychiatric patients having problems getting back from the hospitals to normal life. And then we should do this in the spirit of collaborative design and kind of share our results and publish those and get others' opinions. And we are kind of short of understanding and tools and methods to kind of manage this sensitivity in these problems. It's kind of completely new set of problems to us.
Great. And Lou, if you can keep it brief, then we can just have one final question. So your tool will be?
Actually, that for my personal feeling now, I mean, we're talking about design becoming bigger, but actually the problem of the disabled, especially we expand our role, it's very obvious, and sometimes even I feel some disabled, for instance, when we try to extend the design to the business sector. And we find that, in the traditional design education, that kind of knowledge is not there. And then we invite the business, the people involved in, and again, they find it's very difficult for them to understand what we want to do. So I think that, for me, I think that the bridge between the different disciplines and also the bridge between the long-term benefit and the short-term benefit and the tools actually is not there. especially when we talk about the community, what is the future? For instance, when we talk about the long-term benefit of the community, it's very difficult to let them to really understand and realize.
Great, thank you. Cindy, the question I think you're going straight to was communicating the results one, I think.
Yeah,
do you want to put that one?
That would be appropriate, especially since it's the World Design Capital event. And some of us actually were in Torino in 2008 and visited the flagship exhibition there, which really nicely displayed Torino region, mostly product design, but there were a couple of system design maps that were also on the wall that were done by some doctoral students, and I was wondering how the general audience actually received those kinds of things. And now Tuuli and Lo and Turkka, for example, they've been talking about communicating these new types of design processes and these new types of design results. So are we doing that well? Can we do it better? Should we be making coffee table books so that Tuuli can check out the Pantone colors of new socially responsible design?
Well, there was a question about the new best allies of designers, but I think that we still need to trust on one of our old best allies, and they are photographers.
Photographers, okay. Thanks. Martin.
Usually it's a tangible object, which has by far the biggest power. If I can hand something tangibly over and get people to play around with it, to see it, to feel it, to experience it, then you usually get buy-in. If you want to be even better, you have to bring the people in to actually build it with you. Then you got them.
Co-building.
One other thing I would like to stress, which we haven't talked about, is design research. It's one thing to build a nice product and to showcase it, and everybody is happy about. But if we want to get and stay inside of the textbooks, we have to get data. We have to show with scientific methods that what we are doing is superior to other approaches on going about it. And there's something that I think the whole of us as a community, no matter from which background we are coming from, where we should work a little bit harder on. And this is bringing the design into the research realm so that we can be sure that we won't have this shift to the analytics again that we had back in the 80s, 70s, 80s.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we could do to help with communication are more of these type of conferences where we bring in all these different disciplines, different backgrounds, and really foster these communications. What it creates are inspiring stories and inspiring sort of role models. It really helps me, for example, to listen to all you guys' stories here and perspectives. So I think more of these and hopefully more funding to get more of these started would be good.
Okay, thanks.
I'd like to agree, and I'd say that empathy promotes informed dialogue, and I think designers of the future, not just of the present, need to be multilingual and multiliterate in terms of culture, in terms of the realities people live in. So we need to move designers into the communities and community members into academia, and I agree about the role of research becoming more, using language that is accessible to the community so they can start to become greater producers of knowledge, not just participants in design processes.
Great, thank you. Eric.
Kind of further what you said about photography, I think any type of streaming web content has such broad reach these days, and people's attention span seems to be getting so short. I think video is essential, like 1 or 2 minute videos that outline the demo, what the key points were, what the outcome was, and then how it can be applied at a broader scale. I think you just need to be quick to the point, be catchy, think of like Kickstarter type videos that get people excited in a short amount of time, I think. Direct.
So everybody can video their diary today that they wrote the notes in, up on YouTube next week. Tuuli?
I was thinking about storytelling earlier and thinking about the fact that actually we have lots of partners that we were working with us, the communities, the organizations, and I think they could be also good storytellers to communicate what's been done and how that has influenced and so forth.
Great, thank you. And Lou?
Yeah. And sometimes for the audience, I mean, the story is not enough. And for instance, when we talk about this design for social innovation topic, and the people who and listening, they always ask, could you please give me some concrete cases, examples of what you're talking about. And so I think that it's very important that when we come back to the design research, I think that normally, I mean, the design research, we end our work by publications. And unfortunately, few people can read these publications, even it's in a state of art level. So I think that the prototype, it's very important. If the whole design research society, they can go a step forward. The producing prototype, of course, I mean, they can write papers and books as well. And I think it's much easier to communicate with the people, especially when we talk about the immaterial design, when we talk about, okay, a new business model towards sustainability. It's the business model. Of course, you can write in the paper on the paper, but it's better that we can create and test this idea in the real life. And I think the things are totally different.
Right, Cindy, do you have a thought
on communication?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that photography and getting back to the old storytelling through visuals is a good idea.
I remember an old project, 24 Hours in Cyberspace, in 1994, where they joined up 200 schools worldwide or something, and they did it with photographs and a few words. And it was thought of as an amazing thing then. We shouldn't forget that joining up with simple things can be a very strong way of moving everybody forward. I'd really like to thank all the speakers this afternoon and all the panelists and all the miles you've traveled to be here. But I agree, there's a certain energy of being person to person with other persons. So I think we've achieved that very much today. And so it's my pleasure to sort of wind up this particular session and invite our last speaker to give us a talk. So thank you very much, everybody.